Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm David Little, and I'm a Fellow Emeritus of Trinity College Dublin, which is Ireland's oldest university. In this short presentation, I'm going to explain how we adapted part of the CEFR to support the educational inclusion of primary pupils from immigrant families, a project that ran from 2000 to 2008. First of all, a few words about the context. Since the 1990s, unprecedented numbers of immigrants have come to Ireland. Government policy at that time was to assign these pupils to an age-appropriate class and then provide them with 2 years of English language support delivered on a withdrawal basis. In other words, usually once a day, these pupils would be withdrawn in small groups from their mainstream class for special English language lessons. Integrate Ireland Language and Training, IILT, was a not-for-profit campus company of Trinity College Dublin that I established in 2000 in order to provide support for the linguistic integration of immigrants to Ireland. And IILT was commissioned by the Department of Education, the ministry, to define English language learning targets for the 2 years of English language support, to develop learning materials, and to provide in-service seminars for teachers. Now, what we needed was not a separate curriculum framework or indeed syllabus for immigrant pupils, but a way of viewing their developing proficiency in English from the perspective of the primary school curriculum. We decided to adapt the first 3 proficiency levels of the CEFR, A1, A2, and B1, because they describe a trajectory of proficiency development from complete beginner to the beginnings of independent language use. Our adaptation of CEFR descriptors was guided by 3 considerations: the age of the learners, which ranged from 4.5 to 12.5 years, dominant features of classroom discourse, and recurrent curriculum themes. And our adaptation was informed by focus groups of teachers. What we came up with was a document known as the English Language Proficiency Benchmarks. And this document comprised 15 grids modeled on the CEFR's self-assessment grid. That's to say, a grid with the proficiency levels on the horizontal axis and the language activities on the vertical axis, from top to bottom: listening, reading, spoken interaction, spoken production, and writing. The first of the grids was a summary of communicative proficiency development that we called the global benchmarks. And that summary was accompanied by global scales of underlying linguistic competence. And then we had 13 so-called units of work referring to recurrent themes of the primary school curriculum. Here's the second page of the global benchmarks, focusing on the productive skills of speaking and writing. For reasons of time, I'm going to go very quickly through these, but my last slide is a list of references, and you can capture that with a screenshot if you want to follow up and look more closely at these and other documents. Here are the global scales of underlying linguistic competence. Very simple, as you can see, and just 4 categories: vocabulary and grammar, and then phonology for speaking and orthography for writing. And then one example of a unit of work, the first one, our school. Teachers use the benchmarks to plan their English language lessons in the mainstream classroom to make accommodations for the developing proficiency of immigrant pupils, and to discuss with colleagues the progress of individual pupils. On the basis of the benchmarks, IILT developed a version of the European language portfolio with ICANN checklists derived from the benchmarks, a pre-literacy version of the ELP, which we called My First English Book, a sort of coloring book, a large quantity of teaching and learning materials, and a suite of task-based language tests. What did we achieve? Well, by 2006, the majority of English language teachers were using the benchmarks, and their pupils were using either the ELP or My First English Book. Thanks to the English language proficiency benchmarks, teachers, principals, and school inspectors had a clear idea of the trajectory of proficiency development achievable by 2 years of English language support proficiency that could be easily and systematically related to the primary school curriculum. Unfortunately, IILT was an early casualty of the financial crisis. Funding was withdrawn in 2008, and with the demise of IILT, the benchmarks and other resources that we developed were quickly forgotten. However, the work remains an example of successful localization of the CEFR, and the benchmarks and other materials remain available online. So here, finally, is the list of reference that, as I've said, you can capture with a screenshot if you want to access the benchmarks or the portfolio or My First English Book, or indeed if you want to find out more about the European language portfolio. That's all from me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attention.